What would you do if your commitment to saving lives was met with doubt, prejudice, and hostility? Dr. Maya Bennett, a highly skilled black physician, finds herself at the center of a storm when a life-threatening emergency leads to unexpected confrontation. While battling to save the life of an elderly patient, she faces sharp criticism and accusations from the man's grieving son, Thomas Carlson, whose prejudices cloud his judgment. As tensions escalate, Maya struggles to maintain her composure, all while proving her competence in a field that demands excellence under pressure. But just when it seems like the weight of bias might break her, an unexpected act of kindness from the patient's teenage granddaughter, Emma, begins to change everything. Maya's courage and compassion not only inspire Emma to dream of becoming a doctor, but also spark a journey of redemption, healing, and transformation for the entire family. The sound of sirens wailing outside blended with the steady beeping of monitors, a constant reminder of the life and death urgency that defined Dr. Maya Bennett's every day. She stood in the center of the ER at Union General Hospital, her sharp brown eyes scanning the chaos around her. The city outside never slept, and neither did the hospital. Tonight, like every other, demanded all her strength and focus. Maya was a doctor, a healer, and a symbol of excellence in her field. At 36 years old, she had overcome more barriers than most of her peers could imagine. As one of the few black female physicians in the hospital, she was often caught between the dual weight of proving herself and breaking the unspoken biases that lingered even in the most professional settings. Her one-bedroom apartment, a cozy yet modest space a few blocks away, offered little in terms of extravagance. It held the essentials: a bookshelf stacked with medical journals and novels, a worn couch, and a kitchen that saw more takeout containers than home-cooked meals. On the fridge was a photo of her mother, Angela, who had worked tirelessly as a teacher to provide for Maya. Angela's words often echoed in her mind. "You do not just carry your dreams, Maya. You carry the dreams of those who came before you." This thought kept Maya going on nights like this, when exhaustion pressed down like a physical weight. Her feet ached from hours of standing, and her mind was dulled by the steady march of cases. Still, there was no room for error. Every patient deserved her best. "Dr. Bennett, incoming. 72-year-old male, cardiac arrest en route," a nurse called out. Maya's fatigue evaporated as adrenaline took over. "Let's prepare for immediate intervention. Clear trauma 1. Within moments, the paramedics wheeled in the patient, an elderly man with pale, clammy skin. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, and his chest heaved erratically under the oxygen mask. A family of 4 trailed behind 2 middle-aged men, a woman clutching a purse, and a teenager who lingered at the edge of the group. "What do we know?" Maya asked as she assessed the man. "Name is Henry Carlson. Witnessed cardiac arrest at home. We administered 2 shocks in the field. He regained a pulse but is in critical condition," a paramedic responded. Maya nodded, her mind already calculating. "We need a crash cart, fluids, and epinephrine. Let's stabilize him." Her calm, authoritative tone directed the team into action. Maya's hands moved with precision as she intubated Henry, inserting a breathing tube with practiced ease. The monitors beeped steadily, but she knew the situation was precarious. Henry's heart was weak, and every second counted. Behind her, the Carlsons watched with a mix of fear and desperation. The tension in the room was thick, and Maya could feel their eyes on her back. She had long since grown used to being scrutinized, but tonight, the weight of it felt heavier. When Henry's vitals stabilized, Maya turned to the family. "He is in critical but stable condition. We'll need to run additional tests to determine the extent of the damage, but right now, he's receiving the best possible care." The older of the 2 men, Thomas Carlson, stepped forward. His face was tight with worry, but his voice carried an edge. "Are you sure? You didn't waste time figuring that out, right? This is my father we're talking about." Maya's chest tightened, but her expression remained calm. "I assure you, Mr. Carlson, everything was done promptly." Your father is in good hands." Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked her over. Maya felt the familiar sting of judgment, the silent questioning of her competence that had followed her throughout her career. She had been here before, on the receiving end of doubt, even when her skills spoke for themselves. "Good hands," Thomas repeated, his tone dubious. "We'll see about that." His sister, a woman named Rachel, placed a hand on his arm. "Thomas, not now. Let the doctor do her job." But Thomas pulled away, his gaze still fixed on Maya. "We'll be watching." Maya nodded, swallowing her frustration. She turned back to Henry, focusing on the work that mattered most. For her, it was never about proving people wrong. It was about doing what was right. Hours passed in a blur of procedures and monitoring. The hospital staff worked tirelessly, and Henry's condition began to stabilize further. Maya allowed herself a small moment of relief as the monitors displayed a stronger rhythm. She glanced at the clock 3 in the morning. As she stepped out of the room, the Carlsons approached her again. This time, Thomas's tone was sharper, his face flushed with frustration. "Why is it taking so long? What if you missed something?" "Mr. Carlson, I understand your concern," Maya began, keeping her voice even. "Cardiac cases require careful management. We are running all necessary tests to ensure—" "To ensure what?" Thomas interrupted. "You're guessing, aren't you? Playing with his life like it's some experiment." Maya took a deep breath. She had dealt with anger and grief from families before, but this felt different, pointed. The underlying implication in Thomas's words was unmistakable. "I am doing everything within my expertise to help your father," she said firmly. "You call this expertise?" Thomas shot back, his voice rising. "I've seen better." Rachel stepped in again, her tone pleading. "Thomas, stop. You're upset. We all are." "You think I'm supposed to trust her?" he snapped, motioning toward Maya. "She probably got this job to fill some quota." The words hit like a slap, but Maya stood her ground. She refused to let him see her flinch. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "Uncle Thomas, enough," said the teenager, a girl with strikingly bright eyes. She stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "She's trying to help." "Emma, stay out of this," Thomas warned. "No, you're wrong," Emma said, her voice steady. She turned to Maya. "Thank you for saving my grandfather." Maya blinked, momentarily taken aback. It wasn't often that kindness surfaced in moments like these. She met Emma's gaze and nodded. "You're welcome," Maya said softly. Emma's words didn't erase Thomas's hostility, but they reminded Maya of why she did this work. It wasn't for recognition or validation. It was for the people who saw the value in what she did for those like Emma, who recognized compassion and skill when they saw it. As the night stretched on, Maya continued to monitor Henry closely. She pushed aside the sting of Thomas's words, focusing instead on the fragile rhythm of life that pulsed beneath her care. The first rays of morning light streamed through the hospital's high windows, bathing the ER in a soft glow. The chaos of the night had eased, leaving behind a fragile silence. Dr. Maya Bennett sat in the corner of the staff lounge, her hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. It wasn't the taste she needed, it was the grounding warmth. The confrontation with Thomas Carlson replayed in her mind like a relentless loop. The accusatory tone, the thinly veiled disdain, the biting comment about quotas they stung more than she cared to admit. Over the years, Maya had mastered the art of resilience, but nights like this chipped away at the armor she had built. Her mother's photo sat on the lock screen of her phone, smiling as if to remind her of the strength she came from. Angela Bennett had faced her share of battles as a black woman raising a daughter alone, teaching Maya to stand tall in the face of adversity. Yet, even with that foundation, the burden of proving her worth over and over again was exhausting. "Long night?" a familiar voice asked. Maya looked up to see Sarah Jackson, one of the ER nurses, and a friend she trusted implicitly. Sarah's no-nonsense demeanor was paired with a warmth that made her a calming presence, even in the busiest moments. "You could say that," Maya replied, forcing a small smile. Sarah slid into the chair across from her, studying Maya's face. "The Carlsons?" Maya nodded. "Mostly Thomas. He's grieving, I get that. But some of the things he said—" Her voice trailed off, unwilling to give the words more power than they already held. "Don't let him get to you," Sarah said firmly. "You're one of the best doctors here. Anyone who's paying attention can see that." Maya appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't erase the weight she felt. It's not just him. It's what he represents, that doubt, that hostility. It's always there, just under the surface. Sometimes I feel like no matter how hard I work, it'll never be enough to break through it. Sarah reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's. "You don't have to break through it for people like him. You just keep doing what you do for the ones who see the truth, like Emma." The memory of Emma's quiet but firm words brought a faint smile to Maya's lips. The teenager's courage in standing up to her uncle had been an unexpected light in an otherwise dark night. Before Maya could respond, a pager buzzed. Both women instinctively glanced at their belts. It was Maya's. "Patient update," she said, standing. "Thanks, Sarah." "Any time," Sarah replied, watching as Maya left the lounge with a steadier stride. In the ICU, Henry Carlson lay motionless but stable, the ventilator assisting his breathing. The machines surrounding him emitted a symphony of steady beeps and hums. Maya scanned the latest test results on the monitor. They showed signs of improvement, but the situation remained fragile. As she finished her assessment, the door opened and the Carlson family walked in. The room immediately felt smaller. Thomas led the group, his expression still hard. Rachel followed, looking as if she were bracing for impact. Emma hovered near the back, her eyes darting between Maya and her grandfather. A younger man, who Maya assumed was another family member, stayed silent but observant. "How is he?" Rachel asked, her voice hesitant but polite. "He's stable," Maya replied, keeping her tone professional. "The interventions we performed last night have helped improve his heart function, but he's not out of danger yet. We'll need to monitor him closely over the next 48 hours. Rachel nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Thomas, however, crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "What does monitor him even mean?" he asked sharply. "You're just waiting to see what happens?" Maya held her ground, though her patience was thinning. "Monitoring means ensuring his vitals remain stable while providing treatments to support his recovery. Cardiac cases are complex, and every decision is based on the best evidence and care available." "Complex," Thomas repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Or just another way of saying you don't really know what you're doing." "Thomas, stop," Rachel interjected, her voice firm but weary. "No, I won't stop," he snapped. "She's playing with his life, like it's some kind of experiment." Maya's jaw tightened, but she refused to rise to his bait. "Mr. Carlson, I understand that this is an incredibly difficult time for your family, but I assure you that my team and I are doing everything possible to help your father." Thomas stepped closer, his voice low but charged. "You'll excuse me if I don't take your word for it." Before Maya could respond, a quiet voice broke the tension. "Uncle Thomas, that's enough." Emma's words hung in the air like a lifeline. Everyone turned to look at her, the teenager's petite frame suddenly commanding attention. "You're upset. We all are. But that doesn't give you the right to be cruel," Emma said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. She turned to Maya. "Thank you for everything you're doing for my grandfather." Maya met Emma's gaze, her professionalism softening into something more personal. "You're welcome." Rachel placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, her expression a mix of gratitude and apology. Thomas, for once, said nothing, though his scowl remained. The family left shortly after, leaving Maya alone in the quiet hum of the ICU. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at Henry's pale face. Despite the draining confrontation, Emma's words had been a reminder of why she did this work. It wasn't about convincing people like Thomas. It was about the Emmas of the world, those who saw the humanity in her efforts, who valued compassion over bias. Later that day, Maya found herself back in the staff lounge, reviewing patient charts. The room was mostly empty except for Sarah, who was organizing supplies at the counter. "Hey," Sarah said, glancing over. "How's Mr. Carlson?" "Stable for now," Maya replied. She hesitated before adding, "His granddaughter. She stood up for me today. It wasn't much, but it meant something." Sarah smiled knowingly. "It always does. Sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference." Maya nodded, the truth of Sarah's words settling over her. She thought of Emma, a teenager brave enough to speak against her own family. Maybe there was hope, even in the smallest acts of kindness. As Maya left the lounge to check on her next patient, she carried that hope with her. It wasn't a shield against prejudice or doubt, but it was a light one she could hold on to in the darkest moments. And for now, that was enough. The clock struck noon, marking the end of another grueling shift for Dr. Maya Bennett. Yet, instead of feeling relief, Maya felt a weight pressing on her shoulders. The confrontation with Thomas Carlson earlier still lingered in her mind. No matter how hard she tried to push it aside, the memory of his words followed her like a shadow. The ICU hallway was quiet now, save for the hum of medical machines and the muffled conversations of nurses passing by. Maya's steps were measured as she headed toward Henry Carlson's room for another checkup. Inside, the atmosphere was calmer than it had been earlier. Henry lay in his bed, his breathing steady under the ventilator. Rachel Carlson sat by his bedside, her hand resting on her father's. Across the room, Emma sat curled in a chair, her eyes flicking between her grandfather and a book in her lap. Maya knocked softly on the door frame. Rachel looked up, her face tired but polite. "Dr. Bennett?" she greeted, standing as if to show respect. "How's he doing?" Maya asked as she approached the monitors. "Still the same, I think," Rachel said. "But you probably know better." Maya nodded and scanned the vitals displayed on the monitors. "His heart is maintaining a steady rhythm, and his oxygen levels are stable. These are all good signs, but we need to continue monitoring closely." Rachel sighed, a mixture of relief and worry. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything you're doing." Maya glanced at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Of course. It's my job to help, Mrs. Carlson." Rachel shook her head. "No, it's more than that. I can see how much you care. It means a lot." Before Maya could respond, Emma closed her book and stood. "Dr. Bennett, do you have a moment?" she asked, her voice clear but soft. Maya raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Emma glanced at her mother, who gave a small nod of approval, then motioned for Maya to step into the hallway. Once outside, Emma hesitated for a moment, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her sweater. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how my uncle acted earlier," she began. "It wasn't fair. He's upset about my grandfather, but that doesn't excuse what he said." Maya was quiet for a moment, taking in Emma's earnest expression. "Thank you," she said finally. "I appreciate you saying that. It takes courage to speak up, especially against family." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly, but she held Maya's gaze. "I meant what I said earlier. You're doing everything you can, and I see that. I know my grandfather's in good hands." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. Emma's words were a balm against the hostility she had faced, a reminder that even in the hardest moments, there was room for kindness. "Your grandfather is lucky to have you," Maya said, her voice gentle. Emma smiled, a small but genuine expression. "Thanks. I've been thinking about becoming a doctor someday. Seeing you work, how you handle everything, it's inspiring." Maya blinked, caught off guard. "That's an incredible goal," she said, recovering quickly. "And if that's what you want, I have no doubt you'll make it." Emma's smile widened, her shoulders straightening as if buoyed by Maya's words. "Thanks, Dr. Bennett. That means a lot." As Emma returned to the room, Maya stood in the hallway for a moment, processing the unexpected exchange. Emma's words stayed with her, not just because they were kind, but because they carried weight. Maybe her work, her presence, could make a difference not just in saving lives, but in inspiring others to see beyond prejudice. Later that afternoon, Maya found herself in the staff lounge, attempting to catch up on notes. The room was quiet, the only sound coming from the vending machine humming in the corner. "Busy day?" Sarah Jackson's voice cut through the silence as she walked in, carrying a cup of tea. Maya chuckled dryly. "Isn't it always?" Sarah sat down across from her, sipping her tea. "You've got that look. Something on your mind?" Maya hesitated, then decided to share. "Emma Carlson apologized to me today. For her uncle." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's surprising." "It was," Maya admitted, "but it was also nice. She didn't have to say anything, but she did. And she said I inspired her. She's thinking about becoming a doctor." Sarah's expression softened. "That's huge, Maya. You don't always get to see the ripple effects of what you do, but this is one of them." Maya nodded slowly. "It just made me think. Maybe all the pushback, all the doubt I face, it's not just for me to endure. Maybe it's for moments like this, to show someone else what's possible." Sarah reached across the table, placing a hand on Maya's. "That's exactly it. And it's why you can't let people like Thomas Carlson drag you down. You're doing more than just your job, Maya. You're breaking barriers." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down, offering Sarah a grateful smile. "Thanks, Sarah. I needed to hear that." "Any time," Sarah said with a wink. "Now, go save more lives." As the day wound down, Maya returned to Henry's room for one last check. His vitals remained steady, and the monitors hummed softly in the background. Rachel had left, but Emma remained, sitting quietly by her grandfather's side. Maya paused in the doorway, watching the teenager for a moment. Emma looked up and smiled when she noticed her. "Hi, Dr. Bennett," she said. "Hi, Emma. Still keeping your grandfather company?" "Yeah," Emma said softly. "He'd do the same for me." Maya nodded, stepping closer. "You're a good granddaughter." Emma shrugged but smiled again. "I'm just doing what I can." For the first time in what felt like days, Maya left the hospital with a lighter heart. Emma's small act of kindness, her unexpected gratitude and courage, had reminded Maya of why she chose this path. It wasn't just about saving lives, it was about connecting, inspiring, and making a difference, one person at a time. The day had started to blur into night, the hospital's fluorescent lights casting an unchanging glow over the ICU. Dr. Maya Bennett sat at her desk in the small break room, going over Henry Carlson's latest test results. His vitals had held steady throughout the afternoon, but Maya knew from experience that stability could be fleeting in critical cases like his. As she sipped from her water bottle, her pager buzzed sharply against the table. Glancing at the screen, she saw the ICU code number flash Henry's room. Maya was on her feet in seconds, her heart racing. When she arrived, the scene was chaotic. Nurses surrounded Henry's bed, working rapidly to stabilize his oxygen levels. His breathing had become erratic, and the ventilator alarm blared urgently. Maya quickly assessed the situation, her mind moving faster than the noise around her. "What happened?" she asked, moving to Henry's side. "His oxygen saturation dropped suddenly," a nurse replied. "We adjusted the vent, but it's not enough." Maya scanned the monitors, her brow furrowed. The numbers painted a grim picture. "We need to reposition the tube and suction immediately," she instructed. "Prepare for bronchial clearance." The team moved swiftly under Maya's direction. Her hands were steady as she guided the procedure, her voice calm despite the rising tension. Every second mattered, and every decision had to be precise. By the time Henry's oxygen levels began to stabilize, Maya's shoulders ached from the physical strain. Sweat beaded at her temple, but she didn't notice. Her focus remained on the man in the bed, his breathing now regular again. A sigh of relief passed through the room as the alarms quieted. The crisis had been averted, but Maya knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Henry's condition was delicate, and any setback could have dire consequences. As the nurses cleaned up, Maya stepped out into the hallway. She leaned against the wall for a moment, letting the adrenaline ebb. But her brief moment of reprieve was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. "Maya!" She turned to see Rachel and Thomas Carlson approaching. Rachel's face was pale, her expression filled with worry, while Thomas's brow was furrowed in anger. "What happened to him?" Thomas demanded before Maya could speak. "Why are his alarms going off?" Maya took a deep breath, keeping her tone professional. "Your father experienced a drop in oxygen levels, but we were able to stabilize him. He's resting now." "Stabilize him?" Thomas's voice rose. "This keeps happening. Are you even doing your job?" Rachel began, but he cut her off. "No, Rachel, I'm not going to sit back and let this so-called doctor experiment on Dad. This is incompetence, plain and simple." Maya felt her composure begin to crack. She had spent hours working to save Henry, pushing herself to the edge, and now she was being accused of negligence. Still, she forced herself to respond calmly. "Mr. Carlson, I understand your frustration," she said, "but everything that has been done for your father is based on the best medical practices available. His condition is critical, and setbacks are not uncommon." "That's just an excuse," Thomas snapped. "I want another doctor, someone who knows what they're doing." Rachel gasped softly. "Thomas, stop. Dr. Bennett has been doing everything she can." "Everything she can? Look where that's gotten us." He jabbed a finger in Maya's direction. "I'm filing a complaint. I'm not letting this continue." Maya clenched her fists at her sides, the sting of his words cutting deep. Before she could respond, a new voice entered the fray. "Uncle Thomas, enough!" Emma's sharp tone echoed down the hallway as she approached. Her eyes blazed with frustration, and for a moment, the teenager looked every bit as authoritative as Maya herself. "Dr. Bennett saved Grandpa's life tonight," Emma said, stepping between her uncle and Maya. "She's been working harder than anyone here to help him, and all you've done is yell at her." "Emma, stay out of this," Thomas warned, but she didn't back down. "No, I won't," she said firmly. "You're being unfair. Grandpa's sick. That's not her fault. You're just taking out your anger on her because it's easier than facing what's really happening." Thomas's face flushed with anger, but he didn't respond. Rachel, standing behind him, looked on with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Emma turned to Maya, her expression softening. "I'm sorry, Dr. Bennett. Thank you for everything you're doing. I mean it." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. Emma's kindness and courage were a stark contrast to her uncle's hostility. "Thank you, Emma," she said quietly. "I appreciate that." Thomas muttered something under his breath before stalking away, leaving Rachel and Emma behind. Rachel offered Maya an apologetic look. "I'm sorry for his behavior," she said. "I know you're doing everything you can." Maya nodded. "I'll keep you updated on your father's condition." Back in the staff lounge, Maya sat at the small table, her head resting in her hands. The exhaustion from the night weighed heavily on her. She wasn't just tired, she was drained, emotionally and mentally. The door creaked open, and Sarah walked in, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set one down in front of Maya and slid into the seat across from her. "Rough night?" Sarah asked, though the answer was obvious. Maya lifted her head, managing a tired smile. "You could say that." Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying her friend. "I heard about Thomas Carlson. People like that make me want to scream." "It's not just him," Maya said with a sigh. "It's what he represents. The doubt, the constant need to prove myself, it's exhausting." Sarah nodded, her expression softening. I know it is. But people like him don't define you. The work you do, the lives you save, that's what matters. Maya hesitated, then said, Emma stood up for me tonight. She defended me against her uncle. It was unexpected. Sarah smiled. See? That's what I'm talking about. Even in the worst situations, there's always someone who sees the truth. Maya nodded slowly, feeling a flicker of hope amidst the fatigue. Emma's words had been a reminder that not everyone saw her through the lens of prejudice. Some people saw her for who she truly was, a doctor, a healer, someone who fought tirelessly to make a difference. As Maya prepared to head back to the ICU, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The night had been unforgiving, but it had also revealed a glimmer of kindness and courage, and for Maya, that was enough to keep going. The ICU had settled into a fragile calm by the time Maya returned to Henry Carlson's room. The monitors hummed softly, their rhythmic beeps a soothing reminder that, for now, Henry was stable. Rachel sat by his bedside, holding her father's hand. Across the room, Emma was slumped in a chair, her head resting against the wall as she dozed off. The tension from earlier had dissipated, leaving behind a heavy, contemplative silence. Maya moved quietly to Henry's side, reviewing his latest vitals. The numbers were steady, a small victory in an otherwise grueling night. As she adjusted the settings on the monitor, Rachel looked up. Dr. Bennett, she began hesitantly, can I ask you something? Maya turned to her, noting the uncertainty in her voice. Of course. Rachel hesitated, her gaze shifting between her father and the floor. How do you do it? Stay so calm, I mean. Especially when they question you the way Thomas does. The question caught Maya off guard. She set the chart down and considered her response. It's not easy, she admitted. I've dealt with doubt and prejudice my entire career. Sometimes it feels like no matter how much I prove myself, it's never enough for some people. Rachel nodded, her expression heavy with guilt. I'm sorry. For what Thomas said, for the way he treated you. He's hurting, but that doesn't make it right. Maya offered a small smile. I've learned to focus on what I can control. My job is to care for your father, and that's what I'm here to do. Before Rachel could respond, the door opened, and Thomas strode in, his expression as stormy as ever. He stopped short when he saw Maya. What are you doing here? He demanded. Maya straightened, meeting his glare with calm professionalism. Checking on your father. He's stable for now. Thomas scoffed. Stable. That's all I ever hear from you. Do you even know what you're doing, or are you just waiting for something to go wrong again? Thomas, stop, Rachel interjected, her tone firm but weary. She's doing her best. Her best isn't good enough, Thomas snapped. I'm filing a formal complaint. I want another doctor on this case. Maya felt a flicker of anger, but kept her composure. You're welcome to file a complaint, Mr. Carlson, she said evenly. But until another doctor is assigned, I'm still responsible for your father's care. My only priority is his well-being. Thomas took a step closer, his voice low and sharp. You think I trust you with that? You've been playing guessing games since we got here. Maya felt the weight of his words, the implication slicing deeper than she wanted to admit. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Emma spoke up. Uncle Thomas, stop it! Everyone turned to look at the teenager, who was now wide awake, her eyes blazing with frustration. She stood up, her small frame somehow commanding the room. You're being completely unfair, Emma said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Dr. Bennett is the only reason Grandpa is still alive. She's working harder than anyone here, and all you've done is make things worse. Thomas's face darkened, but Emma pressed on. I get that you're upset, but that doesn't give you the right to treat her like this. If Grandpa could talk right now, he'd be ashamed of you. The room fell silent. Even Rachel seemed stunned by Emma's boldness. Thomas glared at his niece, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. Maya felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for Emma's courage, exhaustion from the constant hostility, and a quiet determination to push through. "Thank you, Emma," she said softly, breaking the silence. Emma turned to her, her expression softening. "You don't deserve this, Dr. Bennett. You're doing everything you can, and I'm sorry for how he's treated you." Maya nodded, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "I appreciate that." Thomas muttered something under his breath before storming out of the room. Rachel gave Maya an apologetic look. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I don't know what's gotten into him." "It's all right," Maya replied. "People handle grief in different ways. My focus is on your father." Later that night, Maya found herself alone in the staff lounge, staring blankly at her notes. The confrontation with Thomas had taken a toll, and despite Emma's defense, the weight of his accusations lingered. The door creaked open, and Sarah stepped inside, a cup of tea in her hand. "Thought you could use this," she said, setting it on the table in front of Maya. "Thanks," Maya said, offering a weak smile. Sarah sat down across from her, studying her friend. "Rough night?" Maya nodded. "Thomas Carlson wants me off his father's case. Says he doesn't trust me." Sarah frowned. "After everything you've done for his father? That's ridiculous." "It's not just him," Maya admitted. "It's what he represents. The constant doubt, the questioning, it's exhausting." Sarah reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's. "You're one of the best doctors here, Maya. Anyone with half a brain can see that. Don't let people like Thomas Carlson make you forget it." Maya sighed, the tightness in her chest easing slightly. "Thanks, Sarah. I needed that." "Any time," Sarah said with a smile. As the night wore on, Maya returned to Henry's room for one final check. The ICU was quiet now, the chaos of the day giving way to an eerie stillness. Henry's vitals remained steady, a small but significant victory. Emma was still there, sitting by her grandfather's side. She looked up as Maya entered, offering a tired smile. "Hi, Dr. Bennett," she said. "Hi, Emma. Still keeping watch?" Emma nodded. "I just want to be here for him, in case he wakes up." Maya smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through her exhaustion. "You're a good granddaughter." Emma shrugged, looking down at her grandfather. "I just want to do the right thing." As Maya left the room, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The night had been long, and the challenges unrelenting. But moments like this moment of kindness and courage reminded her why she chose this path. No matter how hard it got, she would keep fighting. For her patients, for herself, and for those who believed in her. By the next morning, the ICU had settled into its usual rhythm. Dr. Maya Bennett, though physically weary, carried herself with her signature composure as she conducted her rounds. Despite the relentless challenges of the previous night, she felt a quiet strength as she reviewed her patients. Moments like Emma Carlson standing up for her reminded Maya of the ripple effect her work could have. When Maya approached Henry Carlson's room, she found Emma still there, curled up in the chair, with a blanket draped over her. Rachel sat nearby, flipping through a magazine with glassy, unfocused eyes. "Good morning," Maya said softly as she entered, not wanting to wake Emma. Rachel glanced up, offering a tired smile. "Morning, Dr. Bennett. How's he doing?" Maya moved to the monitors, her trained eyes scanning the data. "His vitals are steady, and his oxygen levels have remained stable overnight. These are good signs. We'll keep monitoring closely." Rachel let out a small sigh of relief. "Thank you for everything." Emma stirred awake at the sound of their voices, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Dr. Bennett," she said with a sleepy smile, "how's Grandpa?" "He's holding steady," Maya replied, her tone warm. "You did a good job keeping him company." Emma grinned, the kind of expression that only a teenager could manage in such a heavy situation. "I just hope he wakes up soon." Maya nodded. "He's lucky to have you by his side." As Maya finished her assessment and prepared to leave, Rachel spoke again. "Dr. Bennett," she began hesitantly, "I don't mean to overstep, but do you ever get tired of all this? Not just the work, but the challenges?" Maya paused, considering the question. "I'd be lying if I said I didn't," she admitted. "It's exhausting physically, mentally, and emotionally, but the moments where I can make a difference, where I see someone's life improve because of what we do here, that makes it worth it." Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I admire that. I don't know how you do it." Before Maya could respond, the door opened, and Thomas Carlson walked in. His face was as tense as ever, but he didn't say a word as he moved to the far side of the room. He stood silently, looking at his father's still form, his hands stuffed into his pockets. Rachel gave Maya an apologetic glance, but Maya simply nodded and excused herself. She had learned not to take Thomas's hostility personally, even if it wasn't easy to endure. Later that day, Maya was in the staff lounge catching up on patient notes when her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from Sarah. "Check this out. It might lift your spirits." Below the message was a link. Maya clicked on it, and to her surprise, it opened a social media post. Emma Carlson had written a heartfelt message about her grandfather's care and Maya's role in saving his life. "My grandpa is still fighting for his life, but I want to take a moment to thank the amazing Dr. Bennett. She's worked tirelessly to care for him, even when things seemed hopeless. Watching her has inspired me so much, and I hope to be like her someday. Thank you, Dr. Bennett, for showing me what real strength and compassion look like." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat as she read Emma's words. Beneath the post, there were dozens of comments, many of them praising Maya and offering support for her work. "We need more doctors like Dr. Bennett. It's inspiring to see someone make such a difference. Emma, your grandpa is lucky to have such a dedicated doctor." Maya set her phone down, her heart full. Emma's post wasn't just kind, it was a reminder that even the smallest gestures of recognition could carry tremendous weight. The ripple effects of the post extended beyond Maya's personal feelings. By the end of the day, word of the post had spread throughout the hospital. Colleagues stopped Maya in the halls to offer words of encouragement, and even some of the nurses she didn't work closely with smiled at her with newfound warmth. One of the hospital administrators, Dr. Ethan Hartman, called Maya into his office that afternoon. "I saw the post," he said, gesturing toward his computer screen. "It's a powerful testament to your work, Dr. Bennett." Maya felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Dr. Hartman. I'm just doing my job." "You're doing more than that," he replied. "You're making a difference, not just for your patients, but for their families as well. I want you to know how much we value you here at Union General." Maya nodded, her gratitude genuine. "That means a lot. Thank you." As she left his office, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The recognition wasn't something she sought, but it reminded her that her efforts didn't go unnoticed. That evening, as Maya reviewed her notes one final time before heading home, her thoughts returned to Emma's words. The teenager's admiration and kindness had sparked something in Maya, a determination to do more than just endure the challenges she faced. Maya began jotting down ideas on a blank sheet of paper. Ways to mentor young people like Emma, strategies to address bias in patient care, and thoughts on how to create a more supportive environment for healthcare professionals facing similar struggles. It was the beginning of something new, something that extended beyond the walls of the ICU. Maya realized that her story, her resilience, could inspire change in ways she hadn't imagined before. As she gathered her things and headed for the exit, the city lights twinkling outside the hospital's tall windows, Maya felt a quiet hope take root in her heart. The night might have been unforgiving, but the ripples of kindness and courage were already creating waves. The following morning, sunlight poured through the large windows of the hospital lobby as Dr. Maya Bennett walked through the halls. Though her body was tired from another restless night, her steps felt lighter. The effects of Emma Carlson's post were still unfolding. Words of encouragement from colleagues and even some of the patients' families had trickled in, creating an atmosphere of support she rarely experienced so openly. As she made her way to the ICU, Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to find an email from the National Medical Equity Foundation, a group dedicated to addressing disparities in healthcare. The subject line caught her attention immediately: Invitation to speak on bias and excellence in medicine. Maya paused in the hallway, opening the email. Dear Dr. Bennett, we recently came across a story highlighting your exceptional dedication to your patients and your ability to remain composed and compassionate in the face of adversity. Your work serves as an inspiring example of how we can combat bias and promote equity in healthcare. We would be honored if you would join us as a featured speaker at our upcoming national conference. We believe your voice and perspective are crucial to advancing this conversation. Please let us know if you would be available to participate. Maya stared at the email, a mix of emotions flooding her chest. She had never thought of herself as someone who spoke publicly about these issues. Her focus had always been on her patients, on proving herself through her actions. Yet, reading the invitation, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected, the urge to say yes. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a voice calling her name. Dr. Bennett? Maya turned to see Emma standing in the hallway, clutching a small notebook. Emma, Maya greeted, smiling warmly. Is everything okay? Emma nodded. I just wanted to thank you again for everything you're doing for my grandpa. And, she hesitated, holding up the notebook. I was wondering if you could recommend any books or resources for someone thinking about becoming a doctor. Maya's heart softened. She took the notebook from Emma, flipping through the pages filled with neat handwriting and small sketches of hearts and lungs. This is impressive, Maya said, her voice warm. You've already started studying anatomy? Emma blushed. A little. I want to be prepared. Maya smiled. I'll write down a few books I think you'll find helpful. But more than that, remember to stay curious and open. Medicine isn't just about knowledge, it's about compassion and understanding. Emma nodded eagerly, her eyes bright. Thank you. I'll do my best. As Maya handed back the notebook, she felt a swell of pride. Emma's determination reminded her of her own younger self, driven to succeed despite the obstacles in her path. Later that day, during a rare break in her rounds, Maya sat in her office and reread the email from the National Medical Equity Foundation. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the biases she had overcome, and the patients she had fought for. She thought about Emma, her courage, her budding aspirations, and her belief that Maya's story mattered. Taking a deep breath, Maya clicked the reply button and began typing. Thank you for the invitation. I would be honored to share my experiences and contribute to this important conversation. The days leading up to the conference passed in a blur. Maya worked her usual demanding schedule while preparing her speech in the evenings. It was the first time she had allowed herself to fully reflect on the barriers she had faced as a Black woman in medicine, not just the moments of overt prejudice, but the subtle doubts, the quiet dismissals, and the constant pressure to prove her worth. She knew she couldn't change the past, but by sharing her story, she hoped to help shape a better future for those who came after her. On the day of the conference, Maya stood backstage, her heart pounding. She adjusted the microphone clipped to her blazer, her fingers brushing against the small pin on her lapel, a gift from her mother years ago that read, "Resilient." When the announcer called her name, Maya stepped onto the stage to the sound of applause. The large conference hall was filled with healthcare professionals, advocates, and community leaders, all waiting to hear what she had to say. Maya took a deep breath and began. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "My name is Dr. Maya Bennett, and I am honored to stand before you today. As a doctor, I have dedicated my life to healing others, but as a black woman in medicine, I've also had to navigate a system that wasn't always designed for someone like me." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the audience. "I've been doubted, questioned, and underestimated, not because of my abilities, but because of the assumptions people make about someone who looks like me. These challenges have been exhausting, but they've also fueled my determination to keep going, to prove, not just for myself, but for others, that we belong here." As Maya continued, she spoke of moments both painful and inspiring. She shared the story of the night in the ICU with the Carlsons, of Emma's unexpected kindness, and of the ripple effects that small acts of courage could create. We all have a responsibility to confront our biases, to question the assumptions we make, and to create spaces where everyone can thrive, Maya concluded. Not just for the sake of equity, but because it makes us better doctors, better colleagues, better human beings. The room erupted into applause as Maya stepped back from the podium. She felt a mixture of relief and pride, knowing she had spoken her truth. After the speech, several attendees approached Maya to thank her and share their own experiences. Among them was a senior physician who had spent years advocating for diversity in medicine. "Your story is powerful," he said. "I'd like to discuss how we can collaborate on mentorship programs for underrepresented students in healthcare. I think you'd be an incredible role model." Maya nodded, her mind already buzzing with possibilities. "I'd love to be involved," she said. That evening, as Maya returned to her quiet apartment, she felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known before. The conference had been a turning point, not just for her career, but for how she saw herself. She had spent years pushing forward, focused solely on survival. Now, she realized, she had the power to do more than endure. She could inspire, uplift, and create change. As she set her things down and glanced at the photo of her mother on the fridge, Maya felt a wave of gratitude. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to embrace it, not just as a doctor, but as a voice for others like her. A few days after the conference, Dr. Maya Bennett found herself back in the familiar rhythm of the hospital. The whirlwind of applause, conversations, and newfound opportunities at the event felt like a distant memory as she navigated her usual rounds in the ICU. Patients needed her, charts piled up, and the never-ending hum of the hospital reminded her that the work of healing was constant. Yet something about the experience had changed her. For the first time, Maya felt more than just a healer. She felt like a catalyst. The conversations she'd had after her speech lingered in her mind, sparking ideas about mentorship, systemic reform, and creating real change in healthcare. But the pull of her day-to-day duties kept those aspirations on hold, at least for now. That afternoon, Maya was checking Henry Carlson's chart in the ICU when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Dr. Bennett." She turned, surprised to see Thomas Carlson standing in the doorway. His usual scowl was absent, replaced by an expression she couldn't quite read. His hands were stuffed awkwardly into the pockets of his jacket, and he looked as though he'd debated coming in at all. "Mr. Carlson," Maya said, her tone professional. "Is everything all right?" Thomas stepped closer, glancing at his father's sleeping form before looking back at Maya. "He's doing better, right? Rachel said the monitors have been stable." "They have," Maya confirmed. "Your father's condition has shown steady improvement over the past few days. If this continues, we'll begin planning for his next phase of care soon." Thomas nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "That's good. That's really good." An awkward silence filled the room before Thomas cleared his throat. "Look, I owe you an apology." Maya blinked, caught off guard. "An apology?" He nodded, his jaw tightening, as though the words were physically difficult to say. "For the way I've treated you, for the things I said, They were wrong and unfair. I let my anger and fear get the better of me, and I took it out on you." Maya studied him for a moment, her instinct to remain guarded, warring with the sincerity in his voice. "Mr. Carlson, I appreciate that. It's not easy to admit when we've been wrong." Thomas let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "No, it's not, but Emma—" He paused, his voice softening. "Emma called me out. She told me I was being an ass, and she was right. She said I couldn't see past my own pain to recognize everything you were doing for Dad. And I'm sorry." Maya folded her arms, leaning slightly against the counter. "Grief does strange things to people," she said carefully. "I've seen it bring out the best and the worst in families. But I'm glad you're here now." Thomas nodded again, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you. For everything. I mean it." "You're welcome," Maya replied. "And for what it's worth, your father has a strong family standing by him. That makes a difference." Thomas looked at his father, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. "I hope so." After Thomas left, Maya sat in the quiet of the ICU, processing the unexpected conversation. She had dealt with hostility from patients' families before, but rarely had those encounters ended with an apology. Thomas's words didn't erase the sting of his earlier behavior, but they felt like a step toward something better, an acknowledgement that she wasn't just a target for misplaced anger. Later that evening, Emma found Maya in the staff lounge. The teenager had a notebook tucked under her arm and a determined look in her eyes. "Dr. Bennett," Emma said, sitting across from her, "I just wanted to let you know that my uncle apologized. To you and to us." Maya nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "He did. That took courage." Emma rolled her eyes. "It took me yelling at him. But yeah, it was overdue." Maya chuckled, leaning forward. "You know, Emma, I've been thinking about what you said about wanting to become a doctor." Emma straightened in her chair, her eyes lighting up. "Yeah?" "Yes," Maya replied. "I think you have what it takes. The drive, the compassion, the willingness to stand up for what's right. Those are qualities that will serve you well, not just in medicine, but in life." Emma's cheeks flushed with pride. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." Maya hesitated, then said, "If you're serious about pursuing this path, I'd be happy to mentor you. Medicine isn't just about science. It's about navigating challenges, balancing empathy with resilience, and learning from those who've been through it. I can help you prepare." Emma's jaw dropped slightly, her notebook slipping from her hands. "Really? You'd do that?" Maya smiled. "Absolutely. If I can help you, even a little, it'll be worth it." Emma grinned, clutching her notebook tightly. "I won't let you down." "I don't doubt that for a second," Maya said warmly. As the night stretched on, Maya returned to her apartment, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known in some time. Thomas's apology, Emma's determination, and the opportunity to mentor a young mind all felt like pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. She sat on her worn couch, gazing at the photo of her mother on the fridge. "I'm trying, Mom," she whispered. "I'm trying to make it better for me, for them, for everyone." Her phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Dr. Ethan Hartman, the hospital administrator, inviting her to discuss implementing mentorship programs for aspiring healthcare workers from underrepresented backgrounds. Maya smiled as she read the message, the flicker of an idea from the conference now taking shape as a tangible opportunity. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt like she wasn't just moving forward alone. There were others beside her, colleagues, families, and young people like Emma, helping to create a path towards something better. And that, she realized, was its own kind of healing. The following week, Maya found herself in a meeting with Dr. Ethan Hartman and a small group of hospital administrators. Seated at the large oak table in the administrative boardroom, she listened attentively as Ethan laid out his vision for a mentorship program aimed at supporting aspiring healthcare professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. The goal, Ethan explained, is to bridge the gap between ambition and opportunity. Many young people have the potential to excel in medicine, but lack the guidance or resources to get there. That's where we can step in. Maya nodded thoughtfully. The idea resonated deeply with her. I think it's a fantastic initiative, she said. But mentorship needs to go beyond academics. It should address the emotional and systemic challenges that come with navigating a field that hasn't always been inclusive. Ethan smiled. I couldn't agree more. That's why we need people like you, those who've experienced those challenges firsthand, to help shape the program. Maya felt a surge of purpose at his words. The opportunity to mentor Emma was already fulfilling, but this was a chance to make a broader impact. I'd be honored to help in any way I can. Later that day, as Maya walked back to the ICU, her mind buzzed with ideas for the mentorship program. She thought about the support she'd wished for when she was younger, the voices that could have made her journey less isolating. She was determined to be that voice for others. When she arrived at Henry Carlson's room, she found Emma sitting by his bedside, her notebook open on her lap. Henry was awake, his eyes tired but alert as he listened to his granddaughter talk about her plans. "Dr. Bennett," Emma exclaimed when she saw her. "Grandpa's awake." Maya smiled warmly, stepping closer to the bed. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carlson. It's good to see you awake." Henry turned his head slowly, his voice raspy but kind. "I hear you're the one I need to thank for keeping me here." "It was a team effort," Maya replied humbly, "but I'm glad to see you're doing better." Emma grinned. "Grandpa's been asking about you. I told him you're the best doctor in the hospital." Henry chuckled weakly. "She's got spirit, this one," he said, gesturing to Emma. "She does," Maya agreed, glancing at Emma. "And she's got big plans, too." Emma beamed, clearly thrilled to have her grandfather's approval. "Dr. Bennett's going to mentor me," she said proudly. "She's going to help me become a doctor." Henry's expression softened, a mixture of pride and gratitude in his eyes. "Then I know you're in good hands." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. Moments like this, where healing extended beyond the physical, reminded her why she had chosen this path. It wasn't just about saving lives, it was about inspiring others, fostering hope, and building connections that lasted far beyond the hospital walls. That evening, Maya sat in her apartment with her notebook, sketching out ideas for the mentorship program. She thought about Emma, about her own mentors or the lack thereof, and about the countless students who might feel the same way she once had. Capable, but unsupported. She jotted down potential components for the program: workshops on navigating bias in the workplace, one-on-one mentorship to foster personal growth and resilience, community outreach to connect with students early in their education, support networks for professionals already in the field. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emma. "Thanks again for everything today, Dr. Bennett. You're amazing." P.S. Grandpa says hi. Maya smiled, typing a quick response. "You're amazing too, Emma. Keep up the good work. And tell your grandpa I'm rooting for him." As she set her phone aside, Maya felt a sense of clarity. The struggles she had faced, the prejudice, the doubt, the need to constantly prove herself, had shaped her into who she was today. But they didn't have to define the journeys of those who came after her. She could help pave the way for them, offering guidance, support, and encouragement where it was needed most. The next day, Maya presented her initial ideas to Ethan and the planning team. They were met with enthusiasm, and the group began brainstorming ways to turn the vision into reality. Plans were made for an introductory event to launch the program, and Maya was asked to deliver the keynote address. Over the following weeks, Maya worked tirelessly to balance her responsibilities as a doctor with her new role in shaping the mentorship program. She collaborated with educators, community leaders, and fellow healthcare professionals, each step bringing her closer to realizing the initiative's potential. Emma became a regular visitor to Maya's office, eagerly sharing updates on her studies and asking questions about the medical field. Maya relished their conversations, seeing in Emma a spark of curiosity and determination that reminded her of herself. One evening, as Maya prepared to leave the hospital, she found Thomas Carlson waiting by the elevators. His usual guarded expression had softened, and he seemed hesitant, almost unsure of himself. "Dr. Bennett," he began, his voice low, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for saving my dad, for helping Emma, for putting up with me when I was out of line." Maya met his gaze, her own expression calm but firm. "I appreciate that, Mr. Carlson. It takes courage to admit when we've been wrong." He nodded, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "Emma talks about you all the time, says you've inspired her more than anyone else ever has. I wanted you to know that I see it too now, the kind of person you are." Maya nodded, her heart swelling at his words. "Thank you. That means a lot." As the elevator doors opened, Thomas stepped aside to let Maya in. "Keep an eye on Emma for me," he said with a small smile. "She's got big dreams, and I think she'll make them happen." "She will," Maya said confidently, "and I'll be here to help her." That night, as Maya walked into her apartment, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but the challenges she'd faced had brought her to this moment, a place where she could make a difference, not just for her patients, but for an entire generation of aspiring doctors. She looked at the notes on her table, the outlines of the mentorship program she had worked so hard to develop. It was more than a project, it was a legacy, a way to turn pain into purpose and create a future where kindness, resilience, and opportunity could thrive. As she sat down to finalize her plans, Maya felt a quiet hope settle in her chest. The road ahead was long, but she was ready to walk it, knowing she wasn't walking alone. The day of the mentorship program's launch arrived with a mix of anticipation and nerves. Dr. Maya Bennett stood in a small backstage area, her neatly written keynote speech in her hands. The event was being held in the hospital's auditorium, which had been transformed into a welcoming space with banners, a stage, and seating for dozens of attendees. It was a day Maya hadn't envisioned just a few months ago. Her life had been consumed with the daily grind of saving lives, navigating bias, and pushing through adversity. Now, she was stepping into a new role not just as a doctor, but as a mentor and advocate for change. From her position behind the curtain, Maya could see the audience filling the room. There were hospital staff, community leaders, educators, and, most importantly, young students from local schools. Among them was Emma Carlson, sitting in the front row with her notebook and an eager expression. Beside her was Henry Carlson, his face lit with quiet pride as he leaned on a cane for support. Maya's heart swelled at the sight. This was what the work was for, not just healing patients, but planting seeds for a better future. Ethan Hartman approached her with an encouraging smile. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied with a small laugh. "Just speak from the heart," Ethan said. "You've already made an impact. This is just the next step." Maya nodded, taking a steadying breath as her name was announced. The audience erupted into applause as she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm against her skin. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves. "Thank you all for being here today. It's an honor to stand before you as we launch this mentorship program, a program that is about more than just medicine. It's about opportunity, equity, and resilience." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room. "When I was a young girl, I dreamed of becoming a doctor, but that dream often felt out of reach. There were barriers, some visible, others hidden, that made the path to medicine seem impossible. I didn't have a mentor to guide me, to tell me that I belonged, that I could succeed despite the odds. That's why this program matters. It's about creating the support that so many of us needed, but never had." As she spoke, Maya wove in stories of her own journey, the challenges she had faced, and the moments that had kept her going. She shared the story of Henry Carlson's care, of Emma's courage, and of the ripple effects that small acts of kindness could create. "This program is for students like Emma," Maya said, her voice strong. "For those who have the talent, the drive, and the passion, but need someone to show them the way. It's for the next generation of doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals who will not only save lives, but change the world." The applause was thunderous as Maya finished her speech, but what struck her most were the expressions on the faces of the young students in the audience, faces filled with hope, determination, and the glimmer of possibility. After the speech, Maya mingled with the attendees, answering questions and sharing advice with the students. Emma stuck by her side, eagerly introducing herself to anyone who would listen and soaking up every word of wisdom Maya offered. "Dr. Bennett," Henry Carlson said as he approached, leaning heavily on his cane. "That was a fine speech. You've done more for my family than I can ever repay." Maya smiled warmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Carlson. Seeing you here today, with Emma by your side, that's more than enough." He nodded, his eyes glassy with emotion. "Emma tells me you've agreed to mentor her. That means the world to her, and to me." "She's going to do great things," Maya said confidently. Henry chuckled softly. "With you guiding her, I don't doubt it." That evening, after the event had wrapped up and the auditorium was quiet once more, Maya sat in her office reflecting on the day. The mentorship program had officially begun, but for Maya, it felt like the beginning of something much larger, a movement toward change, a commitment to ensuring that no one had to walk the path alone. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emma. "Today was incredible. Thank you for everything, Dr. Bennett. I'm so excited for what's next." Maya smiled, replying, "The best is yet to come, Emma. Keep dreaming big." As Maya returned to her apartment that night, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The road to this moment hadn't been easy, but every challenge, every doubt, and every hard-earned victory had led her here. She thought of her mother's words, spoken so many years ago. "You do not just carry your dreams, Maya. You carry the dreams of those who came before you." Looking at the photo of her mother on the fridge, Maya whispered, "I hope I'm making you proud, Mom." She sat down at her desk, pulling out her notebook to jot down her thoughts. The story of her journey wasn't finished. It was just beginning. And as she wrote, she knew that the legacy she was building wasn't just her own. It was for Emma, for her patients, for every student who dared to dream, and for the future she was determined to help create. Maya closed the notebook and smiled, a quiet confidence settling over her. The healing edge wasn't just in the medicine she practiced, it was in the lives she touched, the hope she inspired, and the change she was making, one step at a time. 2 years later, the mentorship program that Dr. Maya Bennett had helped establish was thriving. What had begun as a small initiative at Union General Hospital had grown into a model adopted by hospitals and schools across the state. The program connected students with mentors in medicine, offering workshops, hands-on experiences, and guidance to navigate the challenges of pursuing a career in healthcare. Maya stood in the hospital's atrium, now adorned with a plaque commemorating the program's success. It read, "The Healing Edge Mentorship Program, founded on resilience, compassion, and opportunity." Beneath it was a quote from Maya's keynote speech. "It's not just about saving lives, it's about inspiring others to believe they can make a difference." The past 2 years had been a whirlwind of growth and progress for Maya. She continued her work as a physician, but her role had expanded. She now worked as a mentor and advocate, traveling to schools and conferences to share her story and encourage others to join the field. The journey wasn't without its challenges, but every moment felt meaningful. That afternoon, Maya had a meeting scheduled with someone very special. She waited in her office, flipping through a stack of applications from students hoping to join the program. A knock on the door drew her attention. "Come in," Maya said, looking up with a smile. The door opened, and Emma Carlson stepped in, her presence more confident than it had been 2 years ago. Now 18, Emma was no longer the hesitant teenager Maya had first met. Her bright eyes sparkled with determination, and a stethoscope hung around her neck, a gift from Maya when Emma had started shadowing her in the hospital. "Dr. Bennett," Emma said, beaming. "Guess what?" "What's the news?" Maya asked, setting the papers aside. Emma held up an envelope, the university logo on it unmistakable. "I got into the pre-med program at Howard University. Full scholarship." Maya stood, her heart swelling with pride. "Emma, that's incredible," she exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." Emma grinned, her excitement palpable. "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And now, it feels like everything is possible." "You earned this, Emma," Maya said, her voice warm. "Your hard work, your determination, it's all paying off. But remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more ahead." Emma nodded eagerly. "I'm ready for it, and I promise one day I'll be the kind of doctor who makes you proud." "You already have," Maya replied. As the afternoon sun streamed through her office window, Maya watched Emma leave, her heart full. She thought about the journey they had both been on, the trials, the triumphs, the moments of doubt and courage. Emma was living proof of what could happen when someone was given the chance to thrive, and Maya knew there were countless others who would follow in her footsteps. Later that evening, Maya returned to her apartment. It was still the same modest space she'd lived in for years, but now it felt less like a retreat from the world and more like a place of reflection and inspiration. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Jackson, her longtime friend and colleague. It was a photo of Sarah with a group of students from the program, all smiling as they stood in front of the mentorship plaque. The caption read, "Another class of future healthcare hero. You started something amazing, Maya." Maya smiled, her heart brimming with gratitude. She thought of her mother, of the sacrifices Angela had made to pave the way for her daughter's success. She thought of Henry Carlson and his recovery, of Thomas's apology and growth, and of Emma's transformation from a shy teenager into a budding physician. Every step had led to this moment, a life dedicated to healing, inspiring, and building something that would outlast her. As Maya closed her eyes, she whispered, "We're just getting started." The Healing Edge wasn't just a program or a career. It was a promise to herself, to those she mentored, and to the generations yet to come. And Maya Bennett intended to keep it. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories of resilience, growth, and hope. Let us know what part of Maya's journey resonated with you the most. Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear it. Stay tuned for more incredible stories, and remember, the power to make a difference starts with you. See you in the next story.